The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Without further ado, this is a real honor. Please say good morning and welcome to 710 KNUS. I met him years ago. Ambassador Alan Keyes joins us. Mr. Ambassador, thanks for doing the radio show and good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing this morning?
You know, I'm well. Where are we speaking to you from?
I'm away home from an event I did in Tennessee, a couple of events actually. So I'm traveling from Memphis back to my home in Maryland.
Were you at the was that the Bergman?
Charlotte Bergman.
Yeah.
That's right.
I've been reading talk about him, if you would, Ambassador. Charlotte Bergman, Republican, running for the House, if you would, please.
Well, Charlotte Bergman is Frederick Douglass Republican, as they call themselves. People who believe in basic principles of the Declaration of Independence, that we're all created equal, endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights, that government is limited by the requirement to respect those basic rights. And that's, of course, as you know, what I deeply believe in. And I think that the disregard for that fundamental principle, which has now overtaken the elite leadership in both parties in this country, is destroying us. And that if we don't get back to it, our whole way of life is lost. And every day we are seeing more and more examples of government overreach based on the abandonment of the simple premise that government must be limited by respect for the God-given rights of the people.
Obviously could never say it better. What are we watching happen in this country? And I'm going to bring up two people, both of them playing out in the media, one Donald Sterling, the other Clive and Bundy. What are we watching happen in our country today, Ambassador?
Well, I think sadly what's clearly going on, and I've said it for many years, I foresaw it in the person of Barack Obama. I used to watch as this country became more and more tending toward government domination and socialism and national takeover of our banks and industries and land and so forth and so on. And it's not the history of the country. It's not the heritage of the country. It's absolutely incompatible with the Constitution of our country, but it's going on. And I think these forces finally found a willing and bold instrument in Barack Obama, and he is now pressing forward with an effort to turn this into a socialist country. And when he says that it's an end to American exceptionalism, right, we were the exception to the historic rule that a people could not govern itself, that there would not be government based on respect for the rights of the people, but it always had to be based on the power of the few, the powerful, the wealthy, the oligarchs who managed to get in control of societies throughout the world. We were the exception to that, and Barack Obama represents the forces who need to bring that exception to an end, and it's coming to a head right now.
Yeah. You know, there was a term that I read a few weeks back, and it's called "We Now Live Government-Centered Lives," that all of us are the principal force in our lives today is the government. I agree with that, and it's very frightening. Speak to government-centered lives, if you would.
Well, that's the choice that we always had as a people. Benjamin Franklin was the first, I think, or to prominently articulate it. He said that we would either be, those who will not be governed by God, he said, will be governed by tyrants. Mm-hmm. And I think we are seeing that come true. And that responsibility before God is a responsibility to take our individual responsibility seriously. The role we have to play in terms of parents of our children, of people who have to stand and do a job of work in order to take care of ourselves and our families. Meeting our individual responsibilities, forming the building block unit of society, which is the family, associating together to build strong communities where we live, taking account of the common interests we have together. That's the basis of America. Not putting all your power in the hands of some little clique of bureaucrats and some tyrant sitting in the White House or anywhere else who's they're going to tell you what to do. And that sense that we are responsible before God to take care of ourselves and then join together to make sure we can defend that God-given exercise of our rights, meaning doing what God tells us. The government doesn't have any right to tell us to stop, and neither does anybody else. And so that exercise of liberty is what America has been about, and we need to get back to that God-centered sense of ourselves that will then reassert self-sufficiency. I see it in someone like Mr. Bundy. I mean, I think that sense of strong individual responsibility goes hand in hand with a strong faith, and we see it in him and his wife.
Yeah, I had made a prediction, and I'm not that accurate, but that would take a week for the mainstream press or big media to turn Bundy into a racist. I was wrong by one day. It's interesting to watch the entire Bundy video as opposed to what was lifted by the New York Times and MSNBC and big media. What do you think happened out on that ranch with Cliven Bundy, and do you think the remarks that Bundy made were racist?
Of course not. And as I've been trying to get across to people, black Americans, especially those who live subject to this totalitarian government in our urban area, the people who have been under the thumb of the man, as they say, meaning the man from the government bureaucracy, those folks are actually objectively, and I wrote about this in a book called Masters of the Dream, The Strength and Betrayal of Black America back in the 90s. I documented chapter and verse the fact that after the end of slavery, black families came back together. You got to a point around 1910 when W.B. Du Bois wrote a sociological study where 80 to 85% of black families, the children were being brought up in two-parent families. You had folks who had been used to doing a job of work and got out there, and even though, in spite of segregation and everything else, they were earning a living, became the backbone of many economic sectors that were dependent on strong black labor in the South and so forth. These were not people who shrunk from the responsibility of taking care of themselves. Then along comes the Great Society in the 1960s, and all those sociological statistics go off a cliff, and you end up in a situation such as we have now, where most of the children are being born into single-parent families. They're dependent on government welfare. They are essentially being exploited by a leadership elitist class that calls itself progressive, but is in fact pushing people back into the dark ages where the few ruled and the rest of us did what we were told. And we saw the harbinger of that in a lot of these neighborhoods in the urban areas where black folks were under the thumb of these domineering governments, who ended up, by the way, not caring if people killed each other so long as they did what they were told by the government. This sickens me and angers me. And Cliven Bundy simply saw what he spoke about what he observed of that phenomenon. And when you look at the statistics, by the way, people are all shocked and everything, but it's time they woke up. The result of it is a situation where in statistical terms, in terms of family integrity, in terms of employment, in terms of basic health and so forth, black folks are worse off than they have been in the history of the United States. Hear that? Worse off than they've ever been. And since that includes slavery, it's not racist to point it out. And that doesn't mean slavery was good. It means what we've got is worse than bad, and we need to do something about it.
Do you have I know you've been traveling, I'm sure you've seen this L.A. Clippers owner Donald Sterling story. Ambassador, what is your sense of that or your take on that?
Well, actually, I have been traveling for the last couple of days. My head's been in a tunnel. I saw a mention of it this morning, but I haven't read the story. I hate to comment on things when I haven't gotten into the details. But tell me, what's your take on it?
Well, I here this guy is. What I think is interesting is not that he said these kind of things, because apparently he has a history of making comments like this. For the folks in the audience, L.A. Clippers owner Donald Sterling told his girlfriend, this lengthy tape, we have it up, where he doesn't want her bringing black people to his games, including Magic Johnson. It's all on tape. And this organization, TMZ Sports, got that audio, Sterling making these, I guess, declarations in this heated argument with his girlfriend. Now, she's 26, he's 81, but, and I can read the comments, but they're stupid. What's interesting to me is comparing and contrasting him to Cliven Bundy. Mr. Bundy is Mormon, and that plays out in this. The mainstream press has been living on Bundy's religious beliefs. On the other hand, Sterling happens to be Jewish, and I made my prediction that will not play out in the mainstream press whatsoever. Also, Sterling has been a major contributor to the Democratic Party. Mr. Bundy has been charged with being a Republican politician. There's a letter to the editor of the Denver Post this morning that writes, this guy named Roy Legg writes to the Post about the so-called racist comments, the Tea Party, Fox News, and that the Republican Party now owns Cliven Bundy. Now,
well, the truth of the matter is, several things. I get the gist of it. And I see the headline this morning on WorldNet Daily. You know, I write for them and other things, pointing out the party affiliation. And I think this is an example, by the way, of what I believe is true. If you look at the actual results of leftist, Democrat-style, socialist, so-called progressive, but really regressive politics, the end result is that you get, as I said, statistically, a targeting of the black community, targeted for abortion, so that black people who now make up what? Less than 10% of the population are targeted for 44% of all the abortions in the country. A literal extermination of the black population. Welfare programs and other things that have consistently over the years targeted the family infrastructure in order to make black people more and more dependent from the cradle to the grave on the government. These people have ruthlessly attacked and assaulted the black community, among others, in order to achieve their political power. Mm-hmm. And underlying it all, I always saw this fundamental premise of deep, ugly disregard for the rights of black folks. And I said to myself, you know, if you were the worst racist madmen in the world, you couldn't come up with a better scheme for destroying the black community. And after a while, if people suspect you're doing it on purpose, you shouldn't blame them. And I think it's about time people woke up. These people are using racism as an instrument to target others, but in typical communist fashion, what they accuse others of being is exactly what they are themselves.
Our guest is, of course, one of the outspoken men in America today, Ambassador Alan Keyes. We're talking about Cliven Bundy. We're talking about Donald Sterling. There was a movement, and I can't help but, again, do historical analysis, that there was a movement that took place in the beginning of the 20th century, end of the 19th century, and they were called Fabians. And the Fabians principally believed that we could do all of these things without becoming Bolsheviks. Do you believe that many of these people are modern Fabians, Ambassador?
Actually, I've got to tell you, I don't believe that, no.
Because?
And I don't believe it because I don't believe they're committed to government of, by, and for the people anymore. But when you make all these modern terms, Bolshevik and so forth, what you're really saying is some people believe in the American understanding that you have to involve the whole people, that they have to be represented when you make the laws, represented when you choose the governor and the president.
I don't believe that.
They are, in essence,
I don't believe that.
Sovereign people. Wait, they are the sovereign people of the United States. There are people who believe this. The elites in this country no longer believe it. A lot of them have broken from the Declaration. They've broken from the Constitution, and they want to see it destroyed. No. They are not Fabians in all of this, because the only thing about the Bolsheviks and the Communists was that they thoroughly embraced government that was based on the cliquish rule of a few. They called it the Communist Party.
Of course.
We'll call it something else. But these people have abandoned our understanding of government. They're not trying to keep democracy. They're trying to destroy it.
And as did the Bolsheviks, I'm saying the Fabians were the people who believed that systematically you could entice people into voting into these programs. You could bring in socialism without a gun. You could bring in the kinds of and encourage people and educate people into wanting that form of government. And today, if we have that many people, what was the number? 47% of the American people relying on the federal government in one way or another to take care of them. How much further does it go? And by the way, do you think there can be a republic?
Well, wait a minute, though.
All right.
Wait. See, I think this is all unfair. You create a system of Social Security, so a lot of people get Social Security checks, and then you say, oh, they're all hungry for government.
I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying.
No, let me finish, though. You got to be careful, because statistics lie. Okay, and the statistic about the 47%, giving the impression that everybody's sucking on the teeth of government and that we all want to sit back and swill that garbage at the expense of our liberty, that's a simple lie. A lot of people, just like Obamacare, you think the people who are going to end up signing up for Obamacare, they're all people who wanted this to happen? They have been protesting. A majority of the American people have been opposed throughout this process to the nationalization of our health care, the government socialist takeover of health care. Has it mattered to these elitists? And when these people end up in some position where they're having to go along to get along with this Obamacare junk, Do you really think they want it?
No.
I think it's about time we understood they don't want it.
No, I'm
and
saying
so we
that.
can't sit back and say, oh, these people want this.
No.
The American people want to retain their liberty. They're being lied to about what that involves. The second thing is
I'm here.
that I don't believe these votes.
You say you don't believe which votes?
I don't believe the votes that are now occurring at our polls because they are filtered through a party system that systematically refuses to represent people.
If you
don't get a candidate,
right.
if you don't get a candidate in an election that who actually represents
no,
you,
I understand
when
that.
you cast your vote, what are you doing?
Well, let me ask you this
You
then.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. A long way around the barn. We agree, and maybe I misunderstood you or you misunderstood me. Well, I find agreement with that. But what I'm asking you is who? This is my dark horse bet right now. Jeb Bush will be the GOP hopeful in 16. He obviously wants it. He's campaigning to become. Jeb Bush, to me, is, and I believe that he'll be up against Hillary Clinton. That looks as though we have political dynasties. And I agree with you. For instance, here in Colorado, there's very little choosing of a Republican Party candidate. It's the elite chooses, the money chooses. That's the point you're making, Ambassador. Having said that,
that's right.
How can we expect change? Because the change has to come from a conservative movement. And yet, I don't see these guys as conservatives.
Well, I think that this is what gave me encouragement when I watched what Clive Bundy and his family, but also what people associated with him in the community were doing, where we saw folks who understood that in current times, the key thing to making sure you're going to be able to have the wherewithal to be active and to defend your basic rights and to get the kind of representation you need is you got to do it yourself. And that's what American politics is supposed to be about. We let these people foist off on us a phony party system that is now like a grocery store where you're supposed to go in and choose candidates fabricated by other people.
Right.
That's not what politics is in America. If you don't make the candidate and lift up the candidate yourself through a process where people are working together to fight for themselves and they see who is articulating and fighting in the best way for them from right out amongst themselves, and they lift that person up, not some person dictated by the banksters and the gangsters and the commies that are presently in charge of the party system. And so I have been saying for the last several years, you got to get your head out of this phony party sham that these people have put up, and you get back to politics based on the grassroots initiative and association of the people. We saw an example of it in the folks who gathered together to help Clive and Bundy keep from being slaughtered by a government juggernaut. And I've been working with people for years now. People wonder, whatever happened to Alan Keyes? Alan Keyes has been working to encourage people at the grassroots to get this sense of independent-mindedness, to set up these networks at the grassroots, and to rediscover the real basis of self-government, which is not reliance on the leadership. It's being the leader. If your person is supposed to represent you, that you send to the legislature, they've got to follow your lead, follow your heart, respect your principles, respect your morals, respect your understanding of justice and right. And if they don't represent you. So who's in the lead between the people and the representative? Who's supposed to be the leader? The people are supposed to be the leaders. And I've been going around trying to get people to see that. And I see a lot of Americans who are still in that mode. They're leadership Americans. They're Americans who understand that you may be a mother, a father, a worker, a business owner. You may be what they call an ordinary person. But in America, you take the lead. And you work with others who take the lead. And the people you send to the legislature and put in the governorship and put in the White House are supposed to follow your lead, not dictate to you what this country is going to be like. And I think people are rediscovering this, and that's been my life's work for the last 10 years and more, and I've seen it bear some fruit in the Tea Party, and then it got co-opted by the Republicans. People should just say to these parties, go your way. We're going to go ours. And I have a movement on, if you go to pledgetoimpeach.com, PLEDGETOIMPEACH, pledgetoimpeach.com, we're working to get the focus of the 2014 election where it belongs, on getting a Congress that will kick Barack Obama and his communist buddies out of office using the Constitution of the United States. We already have a majority in the House if we could get rid of this feckless Boehner-style Republican leadership. And the Republicans are now saying, oh, we can win a majority in the Senate, but it'll be a do-nothing, no good Republican majority. And what we need is people who will be pledged to kick out the folks who are presently trying to overturn our Constitution. And it's set out chapter and verse how this can be done. And all people have to do is easy. Just sign up and let the number build of Americans who are saying, we won't vote for anybody who doesn't pledge to kick Barack Obama and Biden and the whole lot of them out of the government using the impeachment and removal power.
I know you're tight on time with this, Ambassador Alan Keyes. A final question. Will there be a Republican in the Oval Office in our lifetime?
I got to confess to you, it's a question that's irrelevant to me. The Republicans no longer represent an alternative to the grassroots. We need to be asking, will there be in the White House someone faithful to the Constitution?
Okay, even
will
better.
There be someone who respects the Declaration principles? The Republicans don't anymore.
Even better.
And don't kid yourself with putting a Republican in office is going to do us any good if they don't respect the Constitution and the Declaration and the notion of government not limited by whim, but limited by respect for the God-given rights of the people. That's what Clive Bundy understands. It's why I love him. That he understands that what we're standing for is not our whims, but our responsibility before God.
I'm not talking about a Jeb Bush Republican, but I can include him.
I can't use
I understand. Ambassador, let me get the question to you. My question is, I think the Democrats have the lock on this for a long time, I
don't think so.
Okay.
Look, also, for the moment, get your head out of 2016. There's no guarantee that if we keep letting this guy get away with shredding our Constitution, he won't shred the part that says he can't remain in office.
Wow.
So until you do deal with this danger, you're talking in fantasy world.
Well, then, who's your candidate? Ambassador, Ambassador, who's the candidate?
Don't talk 2000. I just gave you the recipe for my political
I understand
focus.
that. Then who's
2014?
Who's the winner?
Get an impeachment Congress.
Well,
if you get an impeachment Congress, you'll choose the president before 2015.
I understand that, and I've said before that, just before you got on, that George Bush was Lyndon Johnson and this guy's Richard Nixon. But having said that, we had to have so many different things to make this happen. Who is the man or woman you see standing in the wings right now that you would throw your support for in your 16 or 2000?
I see the American people standing in the wings, and they need to take this country back over.
Right.
Talking about all these Fuhrers, and what Fuhrer is standing in the wings to save America, no Fuhrer is standing in the wings. If the American people can't save themselves, nobody's going to save them.
Well, then without a Churchill, without the man of the hour, the man that comes in, we're in a lot of trouble.
No, we're not. Not if we're the people we've always been. Okay, Abraham Lincoln, born in a log cabin, lifted up from nowhere by people who recognize that he spoke to their heart. When people act for themselves, the right kind of person to represent them is lifted up by them. We can't predict who that will be, but I'll tell you, if the people don't get back in charge, it will be the wrong person.
I agree.
And so we better concentrate on getting ourselves together. And the 2014 election, we could flex our muscles. Go to pledgetoimpeach.com and rediscover what it will take for the American people to be back in charge of America.
You're a good man. I appreciate you and everything you do, and we'll try and have you back as much as we can. And I love the conversation. Ambassador, thank you for your time this morning. Be safe.
God bless you. Thank you for having me on.
You too, sir. Ambassador Alan Keyes, that was his time.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.